I was 5 years old the first time I saw them. 3 dark figures huddled in the corner of my bedroom, watching me with eyes I couldn't see but could somehow feel. I remember trying to scream for my parents, but my voice wouldn't work. My body wouldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in my own skin while these things just watched. When I finally broke free from the paralysis, sobbing and gasping for air, my parents came running. My father checked the corners, under the bed, inside the closet. "There's nothing here, Jamie," he said, his voice gentle but tired. "Just shadows from the tree outside your window." But I knew better. They weren't shadows cast by anything in our world. They had substance, presence. They had intent. My twin brother Michael slept peacefully in the bed across from mine. He never saw them, never felt the weight of their attention. When I asked him the next morning if he'd seen the shadow people, he just shrugged and went back to his cereal. "Maybe they're your imaginary friends," he suggested, milk dribbling down his chin, "like Timmy next door has." They weren't friends. I knew that much even then. The episodes continued throughout my childhood. Always the same. I'd wake up paralyzed, unable to move or scream, and they'd be there. 3 shadow figures in the corner, watching. Sometimes they'd move closer, hovering at the foot of my bed or leaning over me, their featureless faces inches from mine. But they never touched me, never spoke, just watched with an attention so focused it felt like physical pressure against my skin. My parents took me to doctors, therapists, sleep specialists. The diagnosis was always the same: sleep paralysis with hypnagogic hallucinations. A sleep disorder, they said, not uncommon but certainly distressing. They prescribed medications, relaxation techniques, sleep hygiene practices. Nothing helped. The shadows always came. By my teenage years, I'd learned to live with them. The paralysis episodes became so routine that I developed a sort of mental countdown, just wait it out, and eventually I'd be able to move again. The shadows were just part of my life, unwelcome visitors I couldn't evict. Michael remained untouched by whatever curse afflicted me. We were identical twins, mirror images in every physical way, yet this fundamental difference existed between us. He slept soundly while I fought against invisible restraints and stared into faces made of darkness. It was during our senior year of high school that I discovered the family connection. I was researching sleep paralysis for a psychology paper, digging through old family photos for the personal connection angle my teacher wanted, when I found my grandmother's journals in a box in the attic. She'd died when Michael and I were just 3, so I had few memories of her, but her words on those pages spoke directly to me across time. November 18th, 1954. They came again last night. 3 of them, as always, in the corner by the wardrobe. Thomas sleeps so peacefully beside me, never waking, never seeing them. How can he not feel their presence? They watch me with such hunger. What do they want? What are they waiting for? My hands trembled as I flipped through the journal, finding entry after entry describing the same shadow figures I'd been seeing my entire life. The same paralysis, the same sense of being watched by something ancient and patient. In the final journal, written the year before she died, I found something that chilled me to the bone. April 3rd, 1978. I found Father's journals today, hidden in a compartment in his old desk. He saw them too. The Watchers, he called them. And his father before him. It follows our bloodline, this curse or gift or whatever it may be. Always 3 shadows, always watching, waiting. Father believed they collect us when we die, that they've been following our family for generations, gathering our souls at the moment of death. I don't know if I believe that, but I dream sometimes of faces in the darkness, faces I recognize, grandfather, Uncle William, cousin Sarah, all watching from the shadows, all waiting. I took the journals to my father that night, hands shaking as I placed them on the kitchen table. "Did you know about this?" I asked. "Did you know Grandma saw them too?" The color drained from his face as he looked at the journals, then at me. "I found these after she died," he said quietly. "I read them once, then put them away. I didn't want to believe it. Did you ever see them? I pressed. The shadows? He shook his head. No, but my brother did. I'd never known my father had a brother. This was the first I'd heard of him. Uncle Robert. My father continued, his voice hollow. He died when we were 19, drowned in the lake behind our house. He'd been seeing them since we were children, 3 shadow figures that watched him at night. I thought he was making it up to scare me. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, anger rising through my fear. All these years, all those doctors and therapists making me feel crazy, and you knew it ran in the family? Because I wanted it to stop with him, my father shouted, then immediately lowered his voice, glancing toward the stairs where Michael had already gone to bed. I thought if I didn't acknowledge it, if I didn't give it power, it would end. You'd be free of it. Well, I'm not, I said bitterly. And now I need to know everything. Whatever this is, whatever these things are, I need to understand. My father sighed, suddenly looking much older than his 53 years. I don't know much, just bits and pieces I've pieced together over the years. It seems to follow certain branches of our family tree, but not others. Not everyone gets visited. Usually just one person per generation. Except this generation has twins, I said, understanding dawning. But only one of us sees them. He nodded. Robert said they were collectors of some kind, that they gathered souls from our bloodline when death came. That's why there were always three ancestors watching, waiting for the next to join them. A chill ran down my spine. Waiting for me? I don't know, Jamie, I really don't know. I spent the next few years researching, trying to understand what these shadow figures were and why they'd chosen our family. I found similar accounts across different cultures: shadow people, watchers, collectors of souls. Some traditions believed they were guardians, others demons. Some thought they existed in the space between dimensions, able to observe our world but only interact under specific circumstances. None of it gave me answers, just more questions. But the episodes continued, unchanging. 3 shadows, watching. Always 3. Until the night everything changed. Michael and I were 26. I'd learned to live with my nocturnal visitors, had even developed a grudging familiarity with them. Michael had moved to Boston for work while I stayed in our hometown, teaching at the local high school. We spoke weekly, still close despite the distance. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Michael had been in a car accident. Drunk driver, head-on collision. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. I don't remember much of the following days. The flight to Boston, the funeral arrangements, the hollow platitudes from people who didn't know what to say to a man who'd lost half of himself. My parents were shattered, moving through the rituals of grief like sleepwalkers. I returned to my apartment after the funeral, exhausted beyond words, and fell into bed fully clothed. Sleep came instantly, heavy and deep. When I woke, paralyzed. As usual, the shadows were in their corner. But something was different. There weren't 3 figures anymore. There were 4. The newest shadow was slightly shorter than the others, its outline somehow more familiar. And as I stared, frozen and terrified, it moved forward, separating from the group. It came to the side of my bed and leaned down, and for the first time in all my years of these visitations, I heard a voice, faint, distorted, but unmistakable. Jamie. Michael's voice. The paralysis broke with a gasp, and I sat up, tears streaming down my face. The shadows were gone, all 4 of them, but the temperature in the room had dropped so drastically I could see my breath. Michael, I whispered into the darkness. Are you there? Silence answered me, but I knew what I'd heard, knew what I'd seen. My grandmother had been right. The shadows collected our family when we died, and now they had Michael. In the months that followed, the pattern continued. 4 shadows now with the newest, Michael, occasionally separating from the group, coming closer than the others ever had. Sometimes I'd hear his voice, just my name or fragments of sentences. That made no sense. Remember the key, he said once. Dad's desk. Another time, I was at my parents' house for dinner when that last message finally clicked. My father's desk, the same desk that had belonged to my grandfather, where my grandmother had found her father's journals. After dinner, I made an excuse to use my father's study and examined the antique desk carefully. It took nearly an hour of pressing, prodding, and searching before I found it, a small hidden compartment in the back of the bottom drawer. Inside was a small leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. It was my great-grandfather's journal, dating back to 1932. I slipped it into my jacket pocket and left quickly, making an excuse about papers to grade. Back in my apartment, I pored over the journal. Most entries were mundane accounts of daily life, but scattered throughout were descriptions of the shadow figures. The same 3 my grandmother had seen, the same 3 I had seen until Michael's death. But it was the final entry that made my blood run cold. December 14th, 1943. I have found it at last. The truth of the Watchers. They are not collectors, as I believed, but guardians. They follow our bloodline not to claim us, but to protect us from something worse. The price of their protection is high. When we die, we must join their ranks, watching over the next generation. 3 at a time, never more, never less. When a 4th joins, the oldest is finally released to whatever lies beyond. But there is danger in this cycle. If the chain is broken, if the Watchers are banished, or a generation passes without a Watcher, the protection ends, and what they guard against will come for all of us. I have seen it once in a moment between sleep and waking. The thing beyond the shadows, the hunger that waits. God help us if the Watchers ever fail. The journal ended there. No explanation of what they were guarding against. No instructions on how to proceed. Just a warning that left me with more questions than answers. I continued my research, digging deeper into family history, looking for patterns. I discovered that in every generation only one person saw the Watchers, and in every generation that person died young, usually in their 40s or 50s from accidents, illness, or in several disturbing cases, suicide. The burden of seeing the shadows, of knowing what waited after death, was too much for many to bear, and yet the alternative, breaking the chain, banishing the Watchers, seemed even more dangerous if my great-grandfather was to be believed. I might have continued in this limbo of knowledge without action, if not for what happened next. I met Sarah 3 years after Michael's death. She was kind, patient, and understood that there were parts of me still grieving, parts that might always grieve. We married a year later, and our daughter Lily was born 9 months after that. Lily was the light of my life, a bright, curious child with Michael's laugh and my stubborn streak. I'd almost managed to forget about the shadows, about the family curse. The visitations continued, but I'd made a sort of peace with them. 4 Watchers now, including my brother, guarding against some nameless threat. Then, 2 months after Lily's 5th birthday, the same age I'd been when I first saw the shadows, she came into our bedroom at midnight, her small face pale in the darkness. "Daddy," she whispered, shaking my arm. "There are people in the corner of my room. They're watching me." My blood turned to ice. "What people, sweetheart? What do they look like?" "They're made of shadows," she said, her voice small. 3 of them. They don't talk, but they watch me. I couldn't move when I saw them. Why couldn't I move, Daddy? Sarah stirred beside me, sitting up with concern. "What's going on?" I couldn't answer her. Couldn't find words through the roaring panic in my head. The curse hadn't passed to me alone. It had passed to my daughter as well. 2 Watchers in 1 generation. It had never happened before, not in all the family records I'd found. "It's okay, baby," I managed to say, pulling Lily into bed between us. "Just a bad dream. You can sleep here tonight." But I knew it wasn't a dream. And as Lily drifted back to sleep between us, I met Sarah's questioning gaze over our daughter's head. "We need to talk," I whispered. "Tomorrow. About my family." The next day, after dropping Lily at school, I told Sarah everything. The shadows, the family history, Michael's death and subsequent appearance among the Watchers, and now Lily's experience. I expected disbelief. perhaps concern for my mental health. Instead, she listened quietly, her face growing paler as I continued. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I believe you." "You do?" She nodded. My grandmother used to talk about shadow people. In her culture, they were called los vigilantes, the watchers. She said some families were followed by them, protected by them. She took a shaky breath. I never imagined Lily would... "You've seen them too?" I asked, stunned by this revelation. "No," she said, "but my grandmother did, all her life." The pieces clicked together in my mind. That's why there are two of us in this generation. Two bloodlines with watchers coming together. "What does it mean?" Sarah asked, fear evident in her voice. "What does it mean for Lily?" I didn't know. None of the family journals had mentioned anything like this. But I knew we needed to find out, and quickly. That night, after Lily was asleep, the shadows came as usual. 4 of them now in my room, Michael among them. But this time, I didn't just wait for the paralysis to pass, I tried to communicate. "Michael," I thought as hard as I could, staring at the shadow I believed to be my brother. "Help us, help Lily. What does this mean?" The shadow that was Michael separated from the others, approaching my bedside. The paralysis was still in full effect. I couldn't move, couldn't speak aloud. But in my mind, I continued to plead for answers. A cold sensation spread across my forehead as if something was touching me there. And then, for the first time, I heard not just fragments but full sentences in my brother's distorted voice. 2 bloodlines, 2 sets of watchers. The balance is shifting. "Find the original pact, Jamie. In the old house, where it began." The paralysis broke and I sat up gasping. "The old house," I repeated aloud. "Where what began." But the shadows were gone, and the room was silent. The old house could only mean one place, our family's original homestead, built in 1879 and abandoned in the 1960s after my great-grandfather died. It still stood on the outskirts of town, a decaying Victorian that local kids dared each other to enter on Halloween. The next day was Saturday. I told Sarah I needed to check something at the old family property, promising to explain everything when I returned. She looked worried but nodded, understanding the urgency. The house was in worse shape than I remembered from childhood visits. Paint peeled from the siding like diseased skin, windows were broken or boarded over, and the porch sagged dangerously. I used the key my father had given me years ago, when he still thought I might want to renovate the place someday. Inside, dust covered everything in a thick gray blanket. Furniture remained where it had been abandoned decades ago, now rotting and home to generations of rodents. I moved carefully through the rooms, unsure what I was looking for, but trusting Michael's message. In what had once been the study, I found a massive stone fireplace, its mantel carved with intricate symbols I'd never noticed as a child. Looking closer, I recognized some of them from my research, ancient protective sigils from various cultures, all integrated into what appeared to be a decorative pattern. I ran my fingers along the carvings, feeling a strange vibration, almost like a humming beneath my touch. One section of the mantel seemed different, slightly raised compared to the rest. When I pressed it, there was a click, and a small compartment opened in the stonework. Inside was a metal box, tarnished with age but intact. I took it back to my car, not wanting to spend any more time in that decaying house than necessary. At home, with Sarah watching anxiously, I opened the box. Inside was a single document, yellowed parchment covered in faded handwriting, dated October 31st, 1879. The day the house had been completed. It was a contract of sorts, though unlike any legal document I'd ever seen. It described a pact between Jonathan Mercer, my great-great-great-grandfather, and the guardians of the threshold, entities that existed in the space between worlds, neither living nor dead. The terms were clear: in exchange for protection from the Devourer, an entity that fed on bloodlines, consuming every member until none remained, the Mercer family would provide vessels for the Guardians, One member of each generation would be chosen to see them, to know them, and upon death to join them as a watcher for the next generation. 3 watchers at all times, no more, no less. When a 4th joined, the oldest would be released to the beyond. The cycle would continue as long as the bloodline existed, but there was a warning at the bottom of the document, underlined 3 times. Should 2 seers exist in a single generation, the pact approaches its end. The final generation shall face the devourer directly. Only through sacrifice can the cycle be renewed or broken forever. Sacrifice? Sarah whispered, reading over my shoulder. What does that mean? I shook my head, a cold dread settling in my stomach. I don't know, but I think because both Lily and I can see the Watchers, we're the final generation of the pact. And this devourer will come for us. For Lily. Her voice broke on our daughter's name. Not if I can help it, I said with more confidence than I felt. There has to be more information somewhere. The pact mentions renewal or breaking the cycle. We need to understand what that means. That night, I waited for the shadows to appear, determined to get more answers. But when the paralysis came, my room was empty. No watchers in the corner. No Michael. Instead, I felt a presence at the foot of my bed. Something larger and darker than the shadow figures I'd grown accustomed to. It had no definite shape, just a writhing darkness that seemed to absorb what little light was in the room. And it was hungry. I could feel its hunger like a physical force pressing against my skin, seeking a way in. This, I realized with horror, was the devourer. The paralysis was different this time, deeper, more complete. I couldn't even blink, couldn't even breathe. The darkness began to move toward me, reaching out with tendrils of absolute blackness. Just as it was about to touch me, 4 shadow figures appeared between us. My watchers, my guardians. They formed a barrier between me and the devourer, and I felt rather than heard their message. The choice comes: renewal or release, blood freely given or the end of the line. The devourer retreated, just slightly, but I could feel its rage, its frustration at being denied. It had waited so long, and now its meal was being protected once again. When the paralysis finally broke, I gasped for air, my lungs burning. I stumbled out of bed and down the hall to Lily's room, needing to make sure she was safe. She was sitting up in bed, wide awake, her small face solemn in the glow of her nightlight. "The shadows protected me, Daddy," she said as I entered. "From the big dark thing. They stood around my bed and kept it away." I sat on the edge of her bed, pulling her into a tight hug. "I know, sweetheart. They protected me too. One of them looks like Uncle Michael," she said matter-of-factly. "From the pictures. He told me not to be scared." I fought back tears. "Did he say anything else?" She nodded. "He said to tell you blood of our blood freely given renews the pact." "What does that mean, Daddy?" My mind raced, connecting the pieces. Blood freely given. A sacrifice, but not a fatal one. The original pact must have been sealed with blood, and my ancestors' blood, and now it needed to be renewed the same way. "It means we might be able to fix this, Lily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Go back to sleep now. Everything's going to be okay." But as I tucked her in, I wasn't sure if I was telling the truth. The devourer had found us, had somehow sensed that the pact was vulnerable. The Watchers were still protecting us. But for how long? The next day, I returned to the old house with Sarah and Lily. I'd explained everything to Sarah, who was terrified but resolute. "If there's a way to protect Lily, to protect our family, we do it," she said. "Whatever it takes." Lily was curious but not afraid. "The shadows are our family, right, Daddy? They watch over us." "That's right, sweetheart," I said, wondering at her acceptance of something that had terrified me my entire life. "They're our guardians." At the house, we went directly to the study with the fireplace. The symbols carved into the mantel seemed to shimmer slightly in the dusty light filtering through the boarded windows. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, holding Lily's hand tightly. I examined the pact document again, looking for instructions. At the very bottom, in the smallest writing, were words I hadn't noticed before. To renew, the blood of 2 seers must mingle with the earth of the threshold. To break, the watchers must be banished by both seers together, leaving the line unprotected but free. "We have a choice," I said, looking up at Sarah. "We can renew the pact, which means Lily and I both give blood to feed it, essentially. The watchers would continue to protect our family, but someone in each generation would see them, would carry this burden. Or," Sarah prompted, "or we break it completely, banish the watchers, end the protection. Our family would be vulnerable to the devourer, but maybe without the watchers, it wouldn't be able to find us anymore." "That's a big risk," Sarah said. "How can we know what would happen?" We couldn't. That was the terrible truth. Either choice was a leap of faith. I knelt down to Lily's level. "What do you think, Lily? The shadows, do they scare you?" She considered this seriously, then shook her head. "They're a little creepy, but they protect us. Uncle Michael is one of them now, and he wouldn't hurt us." I looked at Sarah, who gave a small nod. The decision was made. "We renew the pact," I said, "but we make some changes to the terms." Using a small knife from my pocket, I carefully pricked my finger, then did the same for Lily after explaining what we were doing. We let our blood drop onto the hearthstone where the original pact had likely been sealed. As our blood mingled on the stone, I spoke aloud, hoping the watchers, and whatever power had created the original pact, could hear me. "We renew the protection of our bloodline, accepting the guardianship of the watchers, but we ask for these changes. That the burden be shared among those who can bear it, not forced upon the unwilling. That the watchers communicate clearly with those who can see them. And that when our time comes to join them, we may choose when. To be released to what lies beyond." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the temperature in the room dropped dramatically, and the dust in the air began to swirl, forming shapes, human shapes. Our watchers, visible now even in daylight, even to Sarah, who had never seen them before. 4 figures stood before us, 3 indistinct and shadowy, but one, Michael, clear enough that I could make out his features, see the smile on his face. "It is done," he said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it in these visitations. "The pact is renewed, the terms accepted. The devourer is bound away from your line once more." "Michael," I whispered, will you stay? As one of the watchers?" He nodded. "For a time. Until you join us, brother. Then we will watch over Lily together, until she is ready to take your place." Lily stepped forward, showing no fear. "Will I see you every night, Uncle Michael?" "Only when you need us," he said gently. "We'll always be watching, but we won't disturb your sleep unless there's danger." The shadows began to fade, the temperature returning to normal. Michael was the last to disappear, giving me a final nod, before he vanished. That night, for the first time since I was 5 years old, I slept without paralysis, without watchers in the corner. Lily, too, reported no visitations when she bounded into our room the next morning. But sometimes, in moments of danger or distress, I catch glimpses of them from the corner of my eye, shadows moving just at the edge of perception, watching, protecting, waiting. And at night, occasionally, I still hear Michael's voice as I'm drifting off to sleep. "We're still here, Jamie. We'll always be here. Blood of our blood, guardians of the line. It's not a perfect solution. Someday when I die, I'll join them. Someday when she's older, Lily will understand the full weight of our family legacy. But for now, we've found a balance. Protection without fear, guardianship without terror. The shadows remain in the corners of our lives, but now we know their purpose. Now we understand their vigil. And in that understanding, we've found a kind of peace. After all, what are families for, if not to watch over each other, in life, in death, and in whatever strange existence lies between? The key was heavy in my palm, brass worn smooth by generations of hands. Around me, the cavernous foyer of Blackwood House echoed with emptiness, dust motes dancing in the afternoon light that streamed through tall windows. "You're sure about this, Eliza?" My cousin Michael stood in the doorway, concern etched across his face. "The place has been empty for years. It needs work before it's properly habitable." "I'm sure," I said, closing my fingers around the key. "Grandmother left it to me for a reason." Michael sighed, setting down the last of my suitcases. "At least let me help you air out some rooms, get the utilities properly checked." I nodded, grateful for his help but already feeling the strange pull of the house, my house now, drawing me deeper inside. As we moved through the ground floor, opening windows and removing dusty sheets from furniture, Michael maintained a steady stream of practical concerns. The plumbing needed updating, the electrical wiring was ancient, the roof likely leaked, in at least 3 places. I barely heard him, my attention caught by family portraits lining the main staircase. Stern-faced ancestors in formal poses, their eyes seeming to follow our progress. "Which room will you use?" Michael asked as we reached the 2nd floor. "Grandmother's," I replied without hesitation. He stopped abruptly. "Eliza, no, take one of the guest rooms. The east wing gets better light, and the plumbing there was updated, in the 90s at least." "Why not grandmother's room?" I turned to face him. "It has its own bathroom, and the view of the gardens is lovely." Michael's expression tightened. "The family has always unavoided that room when possible. Even grandmother only used it in her final years when climbing to the 3rd floor became too difficult." "Avoided it? Why?" "Just superstition," he said, too quickly. "Old houses, old stories, you know how it is. I didn't, actually. Growing up in a series of cramped apartments with my mother, who had left Blackwood and the family behind in her 20s, I knew precious little about the Blackwood legacy. My inheritance had come as a shock to everyone, myself included. Grandmother, Isabel, whom I'd met only a handful of times, had bypassed her own children and most of her grandchildren to leave the ancestral home to me, the estranged granddaughter who shared her name. "Well, I don't believe in superstitions," I said firmly. "Grandmother's room will be perfect." Michael looked like he wanted to argue further, but instead shook his head. "Your house, your choice. But don't say I didn't warn you." The master bedroom occupied the southwest corner of the 2nd floor, with tall windows overlooking what had once been meticulously maintained gardens, now overgrown and wild. The room itself was surprisingly well preserved. The 4-poster bed still made up with linens, the vanity table arranged with silver-backed brushes and perfume bottles, as if Grandmother Isabel had just stepped out momentarily. Michael helped me change the bedding and dust the major surfaces before reluctantly taking his leave, extracting a promise that I'd call if I needed anything. Anything at all, Eliza, day or night. After he left, the house settled around me with creaks and sighs that seemed almost conversational. I spent the afternoon exploring, opening doors to rooms frozen in time, discovering odd architectural features, a dumbwaiter in the kitchen, a servant's staircase hidden behind a panel in the dining room, tiny doors and baseboards that might once have been used for cleaning fireplaces. By evening, I'd managed to locate the circuit breaker, confirm that the water ran, though it came out rust-colored at first, and set up my laptop on the antique desk in the library. The Wi-Fi hotspot on my phone provided a tenuous connection to the outside world, though the signal weakened to nothing in certain parts of the house. As darkness fell, the house transformed. Shadows deepened in corners, and the creaks and settlings took on a more ominous quality. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just an old house, my house now, but found myself turning on every light as I moved from room to room, preparing for bed. In Grandmother's room, I changed into pajamas and slipped between the fresh sheets, breathing in the faint scent of lavender from the sachet I'd found in a dresser drawer. Despite my exhaustion from the day's work, sleep proved elusive. The house made unfamiliar sounds, the tick of radiators, the whisper of branches against windows, the occasional distant thump that might have been a door swinging in a draft. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were vivid and strange, I walked Blackwood's corridors, but they stretched endlessly, doors opening onto more corridors rather than rooms. From somewhere deep in the house came the sound of a woman humming a lullaby, the melody hauntingly familiar, though I couldn't place it. I woke with a start at 3:17 a.m., according to the vintage alarm clock on the bedside table. The room was freezing, my breath visible in the moonlight that streamed through uncurtained windows, and I couldn't move. My eyes darted frantically around the room, but my body remained paralyzed, as if an immense weight pressed down on my chest. Sleep paralysis. I recognized it from a previous episode years ago, during a particularly stressful finals week. Knowing what it was should have been comforting, but the rational part of my brain was drowned out by primal terror as I realized I wasn't alone in the room. A figure stood in the far corner, a woman in a high-necked Victorian dress, her face obscured by shadows. As I watched, frozen in my paralysis, she began to move toward the bed with slow, deliberate steps. In her arms, she carried something, a small bundle wrapped in white cloth. I tried to scream, to move, to do anything, but remained locked in place as she approached. When she reached the bedside, she leaned down, her face coming into the moonlight. She was young, perhaps my age or slightly older, with delicate features set in an expression of profound sorrow. Her eyes, fixed on mine, held such grief that I felt it like a physical pain in my chest. She extended the bundle toward me as if offering it or asking me to take it. I could see now that it was roughly the size and shape of a newborn infant, swaddled tightly in what looked like a christening gown. Just as her arms reached the edge of the bed, the paralysis broke. I gasped, jerking upright, my heart pounding, so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The room was empty. The temperature had returned to normal. Just a hypnagogic hallucination, I told myself, a common feature of sleep paralysis. Nothing to do with Michael's warnings or the house itself. Still, I slept with the bedside lamp on for the remainder of the night. Morning brought sunshine and rationality. I laughed at my midnight fears as I made coffee in the enormous kitchen, using a French press I'd brought with me since I couldn't locate grandmother's coffee maker. I spent the day continuing my exploration of the house, this time focusing on the third floor, which contained several smaller bedrooms that had clearly belonged to children at some point. Faded wallpaper featuring nursery rhymes, a rocking horse in one corner, a dollhouse that was a perfect miniature replica of Blackwood itself. In what must have been a schoolroom, I found a bookshelf containing family albums and scrapbooks. I brought several downstairs, curious about the family history I'd never been told. The oldest album contained formal portraits dating back to the 1870s, when Blackwood House had been built by my great-great-great-grandfather, a textile magnate. I paged through generations of stern patriarchs and their wives, children posed in uncomfortable-looking formal attire, family gatherings for weddings and holidays. One photograph, dated 1893, showed a family group on the front steps of Blackwood. My eye was drawn to a young woman standing slightly apart from the others, tall, slender, with a haunting gaze that seemed to look beyond the camera. Something about her face tugged at my memory. The caption identified her as Vivian Blackwood, daughter of Edward and Margaret. I stared at the image, a chill running through me despite the afternoon warmth. The woman from my sleep paralysis episode. It had to be. The same delicate features, the same sorrowful eyes. Turning the page, I searched for more images of Vivian, but she appeared in only one more photograph, dated 1894, looking considerably more gaunt, her eyes downcast. After that, she vanished from the family record. I spent the rest of the day searching through albums and papers, finding only sparse mentions of Vivian. A notation of her birth in 1872, her attendance at a ladies' seminary in Boston, her return to Blackwood in 1892. Nothing after 1894, no marriage record, no death certificate, no burial information. It was as if she had simply disappeared. By evening, my eyes were strained from poring over faded handwriting and my head ached with questions. I considered calling Michael but decided against it. Whatever. Family secrets lurked in Blackwood's past. I wanted to discover them on my own terms. That night I hesitated before entering grandmother's my bedroom. The memory of the previous night's terror remained vivid, but stubbornness won out over fear. This was my house now, and I wouldn't be chased from any room in it by nightmares or hallucinations. I did, however, leave the bedside lamp on as I settled, under the covers. Sleep came more easily than I expected, deep and dreamless at first. Then, sometime in the darkest hours, I half woke to find the lamp extinguished, and my body once again paralyzed. Vivian stood at the foot of the bed this time, the swaddled bundle clutched to her chest. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. She approached slowly, her eyes never leaving mine, filled with that same unbearable sorrow. When she reached the side of the bed, she didn't offer me the bundle as she had before. Instead, she turned away, walking with measured steps toward the wall between two tall windows. There she knelt, placing the bundle gently on the floor. Her hands moved as if she were arranging the wrappings, smoothing them tenderly. Then she stood, placed her palm flat against the wall and turned to look at me once more. Her lips formed what might have been, "Please," before she and the bundle faded from sight. The paralysis released me and I sat up, gasping. The bedside lamp flickered back to life without my touching it, casting a warm glow that did nothing to dispel the cold knot of dread in my stomach. I knew, with inexplicable certainty, that what I'd witnessed wasn't merely a hallucination. Vivian, Blackwood was trying to show me something hidden in the wall of my bedroom. Morning found me examining the wall where Vivian had knelt. It appeared solid, covered in the same faded floral wallpaper as the rest of the room. I ran my hands over the surface, feeling for irregularities, hollow spots, anything that might indicate a hidden compartment. Nothing. After breakfast, I drove into town, partly to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the house and partly to see if the local historical society might have information about the Blackwood family that wasn't contained in the home's records. The Millfield Historical Society occupied a small Victorian building on the town's main street. Inside, a gray-haired woman looked up from a computer as the bell above the door announced my arrival. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone friendly, but her eyes curious, assessing me as a stranger in a town small enough that newcomers were noticed. "I hope so. I'm researching the history of Blackwood House and the family. I recently inherited the property from my grandmother, Isabel Blackwood." The woman's expression changed subtly. "You're Isabel's granddaughter? The one from the city?" "Yes. Eliza Montgomery. My mother was Catherine Blackwood before she married." "Of course, I remember Catherine. Such a shame when she left." The woman extended her hand. "I'm Margaret Pearson. I knew your grandmother quite well. We served on several committees together over the years." I shook her hand, noting the slight hesitation when I'd mentioned my mother. "Did you know much about the family history? I'm particularly interested in the late 1800s, around 1893 or 1894. Margaret's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Any particular reason for that specific time period?" I considered how much to reveal. "I found a photograph of a young woman named Vivian Blackwood. She appears in family albums until 1894, then seems to vanish from the record. I'm curious about what happened to her." Margaret was silent for a long moment, studying me with an unreadable expression. Finally, she sighed. "The Blackwood family has been prominent in Millfield since the town's founding. Not all of their history is publicly discussed." "I understand, but I'm family. Whatever happened—" "Wait here," she interrupted, disappearing into a back room. She returned moments later with a leather-bound ledger and a folder of yellowed newspaper clippings. "These might help you understand. They're not in our public collection." The ledger turned out to be a record of town births, deaths, and significant events kept by the local doctor from 1880 to 1910. Margaret opened it to an entry from December 1893, called to Blackwood House regarding Miss Vivian Blackwood, age 21. Patient presenting with advanced pregnancy, concealed from family until labor began. Family greatly distressed by circumstances. Delivered healthy male infant at 2:17 a.m. December 12th. Mother in stable condition, though emotionally distraught. Family refuses to discuss infant's paternity. I looked up at Margaret, who nodded grimly. Keep reading. The next entry is from February 1894. Summoned urgently to Blackwood House. Arrived to find Miss Vivian Blackwood deceased. Family claims she took her own life in state of melancholia following birth of illegitimate child. Body already prepared for burial by family. No external examination permitted. Death certificate issued as requested. Heart failure. And the baby? I asked, my mouth dry. That's where the record goes silent, Margaret said. There's no birth registration, no death certificate, no record of adoption or placement in an orphanage. The infant simply disappeared from official records. What about unofficial records, town gossip, family stories? Margaret hesitated before sliding the folder of newspaper clippings toward me. These might shed some light, though they're mostly innuendo rather than direct reporting. The clippings from the Millfield Gazette contained veiled references to tragedy at the Blackwood estate and unfortunate circumstances requiring private resolution. One article from March 1894 reported that Edward Blackwood, Vivian's father, had made a substantial donation to the church for prayers for departed souls. Most telling was a small item from April 1894, reporting that Edward Blackwood had dismissed his business partner of 15 years, Thomas Harrington, following irreconcilable personal differences. The town suspected Thomas Harrington was the father of Vivian's child, Margaret explained, seeing me linger on that clipping. He was married with 4 children of his own, and nearly 20 years Vivian's senior. After his dismissal from the Blackwood textile business, he moved his family to Boston. And Vivian? Was her death really suicide? Margaret's expression grew troubled. That was the official story. But there were rumors. The housekeeper at the time reportedly told her sister that she heard terrible arguments in the days after the birth. Edward Blackwood was a man obsessed with family reputation. An illegitimate grandchild, especially one fathered by his married business partner, would have been intolerable to him. You think he had something to do with her death? I couldn't possibly say, Margaret replied carefully. But what I can tell you is that the room where Vivian died, the southwest bedroom on the 2nd floor, remained unused for decades afterward. Your grandmother was the first to occupy it regularly, and only in her final years. The master bedroom. My bedroom. What happened to the baby? I asked again, dreading the answer. No one knows for certain. Some believed it was sent to an orphanage in Boston. Others thought relatives of the mother might have taken it in secretly. She paused. There were darker rumors, of course. Small towns always breed such things. What kind of darker rumors? Margaret looked uncomfortable. Some said the infant never left Blackwood House. That Edward Blackwood, in his rage at the scandal, took matters into his own hands. But there was never any evidence, and respectable people didn't discuss such possibilities openly. I felt sick. You're saying people thought he killed the baby? As I said, small-town rumors. Probably nothing more than that. But her eyes told a different story. Your grandmother never spoke of it, even to me. The Blackwoods were very good at keeping family matters private. I thanked Margaret for her help and left with photocopies of the records, my mind reeling. The woman I'd seen during my sleep paralysis episodes, Vivian, had been real. She'd given birth to an illegitimate child in December 1893 and was dead by February 1894. And the bundle she kept showing me in my paralyzed state, I couldn't complete the thought. That night, I almost broke my resolve and called Michael, almost packed a bag and drove back to my apartment in the city. But something kept me at Blackwood, a sense of obligation to Vivian and her child, a need to uncover the truth that had been buried for over a century. I returned to the bedroom, wall where Vivian had knelt in my vision. This time I examined it more methodically, measuring distances from corners, tapping to listen for hollow spaces. Nothing seemed unusual until I noticed a slight discoloration in the wallpaper near the baseboard. A rectangular section about 2 feet wide where the pattern didn't quite match. I ran my fingers along the edges of this section and felt a barely perceptible seam. Heart pounding, I took a letter opener from the desk and carefully worked it into the seam, applying gentle pressure. The section of wallpaper came away, revealing older wallpaper beneath, a different pattern, faded to almost colorless. And in the center of this section, nearly invisible against the aged paper, was a thin line that might have been a door or panel. I worked the letter opener into this line, and with a soft scraping sound, a small door swung open. Behind it was a shallow compartment built into the wall, what might have once been a hiding place for valuables. It was empty. Disappointment flooded through me. I'd been so certain. But then, as I was about to close the panel, I noticed something. Pushed to the back of the compartment, a scrap of fabric yellowed with age. Using the letter opener, I carefully drew it out. It was a small piece of what might have been a christening gown, delicately embroidered with the initials JB Blackwood, Vivian's child. As I held the fragile fabric, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath clouded in front of me, and the familiar weight of paralysis began to press down, though I was sitting rather than lying in bed. Vivian appeared before me, more solid than in previous visitations. She knelt beside me, her sorrowful eyes now burning with urgency. She pointed at the open panel, then made a digging motion with her hands. With tremendous effort, I fought against the paralysis, managing to croak. "The baby? Your baby?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "In the wall?" My voice was barely audible. Again, she nodded, then pointed to the floor beneath the panel. The paralysis released me suddenly, and Vivian vanished. I sat gasping for several minutes, the scrap of fabric clutched in my trembling hand. When I could move normally again, I examined the baseboard beneath the panel. It appeared to be a solid piece of wood, but when I pressed against it, it gave slightly. I needed tools. In the kitchen, I found a small toolbox containing basic implements. Returning to the bedroom, I used a screwdriver to pry the section of baseboard away from the wall. Behind it was a small cavity in the floor, roughly 2 feet square, large enough to conceal a newborn. I hesitated, suddenly afraid of what I might find, but I'd come too far to stop now. Using the flashlight on my phone, I illuminated the cavity. There, nestled in the space between floor joists, was a bundle wrapped in decayed fabric. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, but I didn't need to. The size and shape left no doubt about who it contained. I backed away from the wall, bile rising in my throat. The room spun around me, and I barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting. When the nausea subsided, I sat on the cold tile floor, trying to process what I'd discovered. A murdered infant hidden in the walls of my bedroom for over a century. Vivian's child, likely killed by her own father to conceal the family scandal, then concealed where no one would think to look. And Vivian herself, dead soon after, suicide, murder, or perhaps a broken heart. I needed to call the police. But first I called Michael. "I need you to come to Blackwood," I said when he answered, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've found something in grandmother's room, something the family has been hiding for generations." There was a long silence before he replied. "She told you, didn't she? Vivian." The simple acceptance in his voice stunned me. "You knew about Vivian, about the baby?" "Not the details, just that something terrible happened in that room. The family passed down warnings through generations, never sleep in the southwest bedroom. Grandmother was the first to break that tradition. She said she needed to keep watch." He paused. "What did you find, Eliza?" I told him everything. The sleep paralysis episodes, my research in town, the hidden compartment, and its grisly contents. "I'll be there in an hour," he said. "Don't call anyone else yet." While waiting for Michael, I sat in the library, as far from the bedroom as possible while remaining on the same floor. The house felt different now. The air heavier, charged with a century of secrets finally coming to light. When Michael arrived, his face was grave but unsurprised. He examined the hidden compartment without comment, then sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "Grandmother knew," he said finally. "Not the exact location, but she knew what had happened. It's why she left the house to you." To me? Why? Your middle name, Vivian, after our ancestor. Grandmother believed you had a connection to her, that you might be able to set things right. I stared at him. My middle name is after her? Mom never told me that. Your mother rejected everything about this family, including its history. But grandmother kept track of you. She told me once that you had the sight, like Vivian did. Like she did. The sight? Sensitivity to things beyond the ordinary. Grandmother could sometimes see things others couldn't. Impressions of past events, presences that lingered in certain places. He gestured around the room. She moved into this bedroom in her final years because she felt Vivian's presence growing stronger, more desperate. She wanted to help but couldn't find what Vivian was trying to show her. I thought of my sleep paralysis episodes, how vivid they had been, how specifically directed toward the hidden compartment. Not random hallucinations, but communications from a desperate mother, trying for over a century to reveal the truth about her child's fate. We need to call the police, I said. Give them both proper burials. Michael nodded. It will mean publicity. The family name... I don't care about the family name, I interrupted. Vivian and her baby deserve justice, even if it's a century late. The police investigation confirmed what we already knew. The remains were those of a newborn infant, estimated to have died in the 1890s. Forensic examination suggested blunt force trauma to the skull. Deliberate, not accidental. The small scrap of christening gown bore the initials JB, embroidered in what experts identified as a style consistent with the late Victorian period. Historical records and DNA testing eventually confirmed that the infant was Vivian Blackwood's child, likely fathered by Thomas Harrington, as town gossip had suggested. Vivian's remains were exhumed from the family plot for re-examination, which revealed evidence of strangulation inconsistent with suicide, another family crime concealed for generations. The story made national news briefly. Century-old infanticide, solved, before fading from public interest. The Blackwood family name weathered the scandal, just as it had weathered the original crime through secrecy and silence. I named the baby James, though I had no way of knowing what name Vivian might have chosen. They were buried together in a quiet corner of the Millfield Cemetery, their shared headstone reading simply, Vivian Blackwood, 1872-1894, and James Blackwood, 1893-1894. Together in peace at last, I kept Blackwood House, though I moved my bedroom to the east wing as Michael had initially suggested. The southwest bedroom, Vivian's room, I converted into a small library filled with books on local history, genealogy, and the social conditions of women in the Victorian era. A photograph of Vivian, enlarged from the family album, hangs on the wall where the hidden compartment was found. The sleep paralysis never returned. Whatever connection had formed between Vivian's restless spirit and my receptive mind was severed once the truth was revealed and proper respect paid to her child. But sometimes, in the liminal space between waking and sleeping, I hear a faint lullaby drifting through the house, the same melody from my first night at Blackwood. Not a warning now, but a thank you. A mother singing her child to sleep, finally at peace. Thank you for joining us tonight, and allowing Nocturnal Narrative Studio to share these chilling tales with you. If these eerie stories gave you chills and left you with a lingering sense of unease, tap that like button, subscribe, and share the darkest legend or mystery that haunts your thoughts. Whether it's an unsettling folklore or a strange encounter, we want to hear it. Your idea could be the next twisted story we bring to life, unraveling its chilling secrets under the cover of night.